What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Top Baits of the Month in the month of November. And what are we going to be targeting? How are we going to be catching? There's a lot to dive into this month. Before we dive into all the goods, you might be deciding whether to grab the camo, like I got on right now, which is more like my lifestyle thing, and heading to a tree stand to go deer hunting, or grabbing the fishing rods and getting out there on the water. I understand this. I'll probably get out there in the woods a little bit this month myself. The cold fronts, the cool mornings, it just feels like fall. You know what I'm saying? Depending on where you're at, we just had a big cold front, middle to late October, finally getting some cooler days, getting in the 40s. Fish and deer are starting to move. So first thing I do want to say, hit on, if you guys we launched the brand new Magellan Pro lineup clothing earlier this spring, and this was probably one of the better selling hoodies, the tech hoodie, and we came out with some of these washed Realtree camos, so like the Realtree Original, Realtree Advantage. It's pretty BA. Of course, in some new graphics for the fall. So check that out. I'll talk about the whole line later on, but wanted to hit on that. It's definitely one of my favorite items in the lineup. So that being said, November is a month that actually can be really, really unbelievable bass fishing. It can be. It is either this, or in my experience, it's either like unbelievable day, or it's like, whoo, we didn't get a bite. Like, it does seem that way in November, because when you collide with them, there's something so magical of like, and the reason this is, okay, I'm gonna give you, before we jump into the baits and all this stuff, the reason behind that is because they have one thing in mind, one thing, and that is one thing only, eating. And typically that revolves around bait fish. And one thing bait fish do a lot in the fall and the wintertime, they move. And so the bass move with them. And so that's why it's such a fine line. It's feast or famine. You might find them one day, the wind's blowing in, this is going on, and all of a sudden, bada bing, bada boom, poof, they're gone. I mean, 12 hours later, you roll up in your tournament, and you're like, where do they go? They're gone. It's a month that I always challenge a lot of fellow fishermen out there, don't get discouraged. You got to find new fish. They're moving, they're constantly adjusting and changing, and so when you could figure that out, again, it can be magical. So that being said, November has been some of the months that I've caught some of my biggest fish, because what happens is in November, a lot of the lakes around my area, the water starts to drop. So you have a thing called winter drawdown. In some of the areas all over the country, you have this, maybe not as much so in the natural lakes, but you still have it naturally happening because you don't have as much rain in the fall. The waters start to recede, less water, things start to evaporate. You typically have lower water on your bodies of water than you do in the springtime. Even if you're fishing natural lakes, you tend to have this. It tends to make things a little bit different from the standpoint of like, you don't have as many options, you don't have like as much cover in the water, right? So that makes it even a little bit different. Like, you don't have the bushes, you don't have all the docks in the water, you don't have all these things. So it changes the tactics of how we're going to be going about it. Now you might have stumps. Stumps are a big thing this time of year, but so we can break down all of that stuff, but that is a major player when it comes to this month. And shout out to all of my friends and fans out there that were dropping comments below, always voting for the lakes that they wanted. So this month, in the month of November, we're going to decide to break down Kentucky Lake. So we're gonna break down Kentucky Lake. Some of this is gonna be talking about Kentucky Lake itself, and then other bits of this we'll be talking about how I'm going to utilize this on a highland reservoir, how I'm going to utilize this on a natural lake. So even though it might not work for Kentucky Lake, I want to sort of bring it full circle to give you guys, ideas of how this might work in your area, because you might not have a Tennessee River lake in your area. The one thing that's cool about talking about the Tennessee River is the patterns tend to work similar across the whole chain. I'm talking about Kentucky Lake. This is going to work on Chickamauga, probably going to work even all the way up Fort Loudon, Tellico, work on Watts Bar, so on and so forth. Maybe not this exact, but it's going to work. The general idea is going to work, should work on all these lakes. The only thing that's the outlier is probably Gunnersville, just because Gunnersville has so much grass. A little different, but still the premise works. So that being said, that's going to be the name of the lake. That's the lake we're going to be breaking down. And so let's just jump into it. I think we should probably jump into it. I think so. It's time. Nick says, get on with it. Before we jump into what I like, the goods, I'm giving you guys some really good stuff this time. So we're going to be talking about some forward-facing sonar, a lot of that actually, later on this video. I'm going to give you guys stuff that I've never even talked about. I'm going to give you guys the goods. I'm not going to give you 100% of it. We might have to give you 100% of it later on in another video, but I'm going to give you guys like a lot. First thing we have to talk about. I know you guys have been waiting for this a long time now, and I've been people like DM me, they've been messaging me, emails, hey, when can I get them? The wait's over, okay? And what you're talking about, the month of November, the big freeloaders are here. 5 1/4, 6 1/4, these guys are officially available in your local academies. Boom, ready to go, just in time for minnow shaking season. All right, so it is dropping right now. These are awesome. Obviously, you guys have seen me use them. You've been talking. I won Kentucky Lake on it, caught some of my fish, obviously on a jig as well. A lot of my fish that last day on a jig, but caught a lot of my fish on the 5 1/4. And then on Chickamauga, if you go back to my videos, the 6 1/4 was a major player fishing out there. So we're gonna break down all this stuff as well as the new 4 1/2 inch Mooch minnow and the 2 1/2 inch Mooch minnow. So you have the 3 1/2 in the middle. So we're gonna break down all of this goods of why you need this, what you need, and all that stuff. But I do want to mention this, just dropping. Probably, if you roll up in your academy, it probably is even setting, or you might have already seen it, letting you know this is the first opportunity you have to throw it, which the fish haven't seen it, other than if it's in my boat or Dustin's boat or about 4 other pros out there's boats. You got to get on it before everybody's got them, right? You got to have that. But let's jump into the conventional way of bass fishing first, just because not everybody has forward-facing sonar. MLF is really focused on the high school side, not allowing forward-facing sonar to make it more opportunity for like a lot of people. I'm not saying I'm against it at all. I'm just saying that if you have a John boat with a trolling motor, you can compete. You know what I'm saying? It just helps helps a little bit, go along a little ways. So let's just talk about general patterns first, and then we'll dive into the deep dive into the minnow world, and it'll go, I don't know how many rabbit holes we'll go down, but we will go down plenty of them. Yes, a lot of the baits I'm gonna be selecting for this time of year is gonna be bait fish driven. First off and foremost, let's just go ahead and talk about a staple that I think that you gotta have in your lineup is a spinnerbait. Slept on so much. A spinnerbait to me, this is an accent spinnerbait. It's actually one that I worked on, that being 1/2 ounce. This guy, double willow. I like the double willow this time of year just in general. Depending on your water clarity, changing your skirt color. I like this color in the stained water. A lot of times we get a lot of fronts and you got a lot of wind. And so if you get a lot of wind in that day, a white chartreuse, but not like a gaudy white and chartreuse, not like a flat white and chartreuse. I like this, like it's more of a pearl white and chartreuse. So it just makes it look less like it's not like a springtime water's trash, muddy water scenario, right? This is more of like a subtle, still got a little bit of difference, but it still looks shady and looks good. I pair that up with that 3-inch mare on him. He's actually been bit, so I have to rig this guy up a little bit. I would recommend putting a dab of super glue, bop, on that guy, just again to lock him in place. That way you're not having it pull down, and as you catch 1 or 2, it's gonna give you a little bit more out of each bait. Just putting a little swim bait on there, it is good. Color, a lot of times I'll switch it out to like a blue glimmer color if I want more translucent, like something more like blue glimmer, or I'll throw a gaudier color if it's really muddy and you got like some rain. I'll throw like a straight chartreuse or a white chartreuse that's flat white. It just seems like it has a little bit more there. And I'll still throw a double willow. A lot of people don't realize how much a double willow has vibration-wise. Tons of vibration, and it seems to work really, really well. In the fall, obviously they're eating shad. Typically wind-blown areas, if the water's a little just cleaner to stained, would be better because you need your bait fish to be present a lot of times. It helps. It helps. Everything revolves around the bait this time of year, and it definitely helps to have that rocky banks, wind-blown rocky banks, stumps, laydowns. That's where I'm gonna be throwing this guy. So as far as rod goes, a 7.0 medium heavy or a 7.3 medium heavy and the Jake Wheeler 2.0 is what I'm throwing. Just something with a good little tip to it. I do like a 6/8 to 1 gear ratio or like a 7, like below a 7 to 1 or lower. I don't like a fast gear ratio that much this time of year. I want to start to slow it down. Water temperatures are starting now to drop into those low 60s in some of those places. If you're up north, it's going to be in the 50s. So you're going to start, the bass, their mindset changes. So as the water temperature drops, I feel like that number's like mid 50s. It takes them longer to process information. It might be like 50s the number, but it takes them a little longer. So fall, it probably hasn't happened quite yet, but that's when I'll slow my retrieve down, allowing them to have time to actually look at the bait, eat it, and so on and so forth. So spinnerbaits, definitely gotta have them. That's that half-ounce accent. My buddy Brett Ronseville, he is down there towards actually in Alabama now. So worked with this company for several years. Awesome spinnerbait. Check them out. Don't be afraid to throw something you like. If you have a spinnerbait that you love, definitely chuck it out there. Next in the lineup. Oh, actually, before we do that, I forgot something. Let's go ahead and jump onto Kentucky Lake and check this thing out. So Kentucky Lake's huge. So where do you start? There's a lot of questions. There's the north end, there's the south, there's all these things. One cool thing I'm gonna teach you about Kentucky Lake, water flows from the south to the north. So unique, it is a dam. So water comes out over in this area. Obviously see the dam right there, that's the north. Then obviously comes from all the way down through here. Here goes all the way up into basically Pickwick. So there's Pickwick Lake, that water comes all the way down through here. So we're gonna talk about more of the mid-lake because there's a lot of options in the mid-lake, and it gets flatter okay, think about this as like a lake. It gets flat, it's deeper towards the dam. It gets flatter and flatter as you go up into further south, actually. Because like when you go up the lake, which would be south, which is weird to think about, things flatten out. You have more shallow ledges, more shallow water, just like you going up a creek or a river. They're gonna be more of that. You're gonna have flatter areas. So similar to like when you think about this, like the fundamentals of a lake still stay the same. Deeper water towards the dam, typically sort of flattening out as you go further up the river. You're gonna have more flats, more areas like that. Yeah, creeks are always a great option to look at just because there's always typically a big push of bait in those creeks. Now the whole thing, I don't believe this all the time, but I understand where it comes from. So the one myth I wanna talk about in bass fishing in the fall, the bass all go to the backs of the creeks. They're going to the backs of the creeks, it's where they all go. No. That's wrong. Now, the creeks do play a role. And the reason I think this is why we see it a lot is because there's so much bait typically is in the backs of the creeks, and we can visually see that with our eyes. So let's just take a bay, for instance, like say like Rhodes Bay right here. I'm gonna slide in here. This is a typical like bay or creek arm off the lake. You have the main river right here, currents run this way. Typically in the creeks themselves, there's not as much current. So you're gonna slide into this area in Rhodes Bay. You got this big flat back here. The water's dropped 6 feet. So basically everything that's in orange is almost out of the water. So basically like 7 feet and less. So that whole back of that bay is out of the water. You have stake beds, you have all this stuff. You have any kind of wood in the back half of this creek. Water's a little stained, probably just a smidge from the water drawdown. That's any of those like stake beds, any of these like steeper banks right here in the very back of here. Great place to throw a spinnerbait, great place to fish down those banks, especially if you have a little bit of wind. The brighter the sun, the flat, calm conditions, worst time to throw a spinnerbait. Typically, unless the water's really dirty. If the water's really dirty, you can get away with that because now that wind, you don't need that wind to really disguise your lure. You have so much dirty water, the bass is sort of reacting on that. So that's why a lot of times in the fall, if you get those flat, calm, sunny conditions, I'll tend to run towards dirtier water because you can get away with a lot more in those dirty water conditions. Something to think about as you're sort of developing the pattern, the area you're looking for to fish on your body of water in November. Another really good bait to be fishing this time of year is a flatside crankbait. This is Ott's crankbait right here. It's the OG Tiny. I like this crankbait a lot. He runs about 3 feet deep, which works really well when you're talking about like little hard cover pea gravelly banks, little rocky banks, stuff like that. Flat sides are really forgot about a little bit more because you hear a lot more about Alabama rigs, you hear a lot more about minnows this time of year if you're utilizing the forward-facing sonar, but you can utilize a lot of these techniques and catch a lot of fish that are not really being, they're in 2 to 5 feet of water, right? A lot of these fish are staying that deep most of the time, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So this guy right here is a great little lure that I feel like it casts pretty good for a smaller crankbait. I throw that 12-pound Suffix Advanced Flourocarbon. I'll even go down to 10. He's a 3 to 4 foot diver. And then as far as rod goes, this is a 7.2 Crankin rod, 7.2 2.0. I really like this rod for that. Like a DT6, a flat side. Just overall, I can get a little bit more distance out of them. Like a 7.2 seems like the best overall size for a cranking rod. When you're like fishing shallow crankbaits or a DT6 or something like that, even to do a DT10, you want something that you can cast, you have the distance to cast, right? So like if you're on a flat and you're trying to make longer casts, or for instance, like if you want to roll cast around, like a 7.2 is the perfect size. Like if you go to like a 7-footer, you're not getting the full distance in casting, like out there on some of those flats. But then if you go to like almost like a 7.3 or a 7.4 or 7.5 or 7.6 to get distance, then it's harder to make those roll casts. So like you can't get around cover, get on docks, lay down, just that kind of stuff. So like to me, this is the perfect all-around cranking rod. That size gives me the best of both worlds. So if I'm looking for one size, that 7.2, 7.3 is probably the size of a cranking rod that I'm going to pick up. So that being said, cranking rod, I'll sort of dive into this. This, you don't have to be in a bay. Let's sort of slide outside this bay. And now we're gonna think more river. As that water is being drawn down, typically the water is dirtier in the bays, but if you have a little bit of a windy day, you have wind currents. And so even if they're not drawing a lot of current because the water's all the way drawn down, a lot of times these main river, main lake channel banks, the ones you see those day markers on, bluff walls, little steeper banks, that's a great way to throw that crankbait. Crank those down those edges, even spinnerbait at times, down those little edges, those little places like that. That's what I'm looking for, trying to always think, okay, like the current's gonna be hitting that area. I'm gonna focus my time in those little zones right there. That tends to help out a lot and generate, you can get some good bites on that kind of stuff. And you gotta also think that Kentucky Lake has a lot of smallmouth in it. So those fish are setting up on that. You'll catch largemouth, smallmouth, both. We are on the LBL side of the lake right in here. So, and you can also see how this day marker is sitting right there. If that current is coming down through there, it's hitting this whole bank right here because that bank is sort of cheated out to where it's that current's allowing it, it's flowing right down through there. It has to go down that bank. So that's a good place. Like that's not a super steep bank right there, but actually with the water dropping, see how red it is? It's gonna be a lot steeper, because I don't have like a lake offset on this right here. It's gonna be a lot steeper than this looks. So you can see where the contours get really tight right there and there. So that water is probably gonna be, that's all gonna be right there is gonna be basically out of water. So now you're fishing that corner of that break line. So you have a lot of little ins and outs. Contours get tight, open up. Contours get tight, open up. Really good little place that I feel like could get a bite or two. If I gave up somebody's spot, I'm sorry. I'm not giving up everything, but I'm gonna give you guys some goods. Let's talk about one that definitely needs to be talked about as well, and that is a jerkbait. This is that Maverick. I really like a Maverick. Like a Maverick's probably day in and day out to me, like this is the jerkbait that I'm going to throw the majority of the time. A Maverick, it's like more like a French pearl, like almost like a sexy shad color. This is a good sort of this time of year if you have a little stained water, right? Little bit of just a little dinge. You have more pearl, but he still is like, you can sort of see him. He's like sort of a little bit translucent as well. The cool thing about this bait right here is he's ready to go right out of the package. And what I mean by that is a lot of jerkbaits, you buy a jerkbait and you get them in and it's like, you got to swap the hooks out. The jerkbait's this. It might be expensive jerkbait, but as you know, the hooks they're not that great. These hooks are red lines and they are insanely sharp. Insane. Hudson was out here just a second ago and I'm like, he got close to this jerkbait and I bought free. Because like he's good with most everything else, but like these hooks right here, I've gotten one of these in my thumb. I've had them in sharp. Do not mishandle a bass, taking the bass off with this jerkbait. He might hook the bass, but he'll probably get you too. I'm just telling you, forewarning, careful. So that's awesome there. It's also weighted really well. 6'8" jerkbait rod, 12-pound Flourocarbon, Suffix Advanced Flourocarbon. This is really what I throw a lot. But that rod right there is in that 2.0 series as well. Another way, now the thing is, I will throw a jerkbait where so spinnerbait cranking, where I'll throw a jerkbait, they'll bite a jerkbait in clear water, right? And even stained water they will, but they'll bite this jerkbait, and we'll just sort of talk about that even there. So say that water, the same bank we were just talking about earlier, right here, outside of roads. That little bank, in my mind, the water is really clean. If that water is clean, cranking, or if it's not low light, cranking's probably not gonna be the best deal. And if the water's clean and is calmer, then spinnerbait is probably not gonna be the best deal either. So then I could be fishing the same bank and then like, pick that jerkbait, a Maverick up, maybe throw matte shad on because I wanted a little bit more translucent or like a Pro Blue or something like that. And go down that bank, stay out in 15 foot of water and throw that jerkbait and start bop, 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 lock up. There he is. You just gotta, that's why I'm talking about all these baits, because literally the exact same bank you fished yesterday that you caught them cranking on, you might have to switch to a jerkbait and catch those fish doing that. So you have to really adjust your tactics to the conditions in the fall more than anything, because again, they're only thinking about one thing. They're eating shad mostly in a lot of our lakes, but they definitely know a difference between a shad and a bait. Like, they've been pressured all year, so they know what's going on. Trust me, they're not like, they know. And don't be afraid to cover water, right? Do not be afraid. This is the time of year covering water just because you caught them. I'll tell you, for instance, like in the fall, I spent a lot of time like fishing tournaments, like especially like club classics, stuff like that in the fall, and just fun stuff that I used to do back in the day. And I always typically, when you had 2-day tournaments, so what I was saying was that the tournaments that I fished in the fall, days 1 and 2, those 2-day tournaments, your day 1 weight was typically higher. You would fluctuate a lot. Your day 1 weight was higher because you had these spots in mind. Conditions were similar than your day 2 weight because you kept on trying to do the exact same thing. Typically in the fall, you can't get away with doing the exact same thing 2 days in a row in the same spots. You can do the same thing, but typically you're gonna have to adjust and find new fish. So that's all I was really getting at. Again, they move non-stop. All that being said, we do have one more bait that I want to hit on. This sort of transition segues into sort of where I want to go on the backside and talking about all the new minnows and all the new stuff here. And we're going to slide into a different area of the lake to do this. Not too crazy, but we're going to just go ahead and slide into maybe a bigger arm. Let's just go slide into Bear Creek, just because it's a bigger place. Bear Creek right here. You have a lot of flats, I have a lot of fish that live in this area of the lake. So any of these backwater bays are similar. You have the creek itself back here. You lose your contour as you get further back into some of these bays. But okay, let's just go back into this King Creek area, just because, hey, why not? You have some depth, you have some, these are all like little stake beds, brush shelters, what they're calling them. Let's just sort of start back here for right now, just to sort of talk about it. And you, again, imagine everything 7 foot and shallower, you can see the 7 foot mark, is now out of the water, right? So all that stuff back there is out of the water from the wind drawdown. And one bait that I think, especially when you have a lot of wind and a lot of cloud cover, that does not get utilized enough, this is sort of the unsung hero. This bait's not available yet, but is a lipless crankbait. You can't go wrong with a lipless, just because I feel like a lipless crankbait right there is awesome. And chrome blue, I mean, that's probably the most old school cranking color of all, right? Old school chrome blue, it's the time of year, they're eating smaller shad, just like this guy right here. And what really the key is with this is these fish are in these drains or in these pockets for some point in time, right? So the wind blow, say it's early in the morning, the shad will move in the backs, and the shad will get high in the water column in the mornings, and they'll push in the backs of some of these pockets sometimes that are in this area, not all the shad in the lake. They'll shift further back. And so as I look at it, they'll shift back. You see like this drain right here. It's very subtle. It's harder to tell. The same premise of everything in bass fishing sort of goes, I mean, similar. So like this would be the deeper side of the drain, because you can see that little ditch that comes in there right there. You'll see that side, that ditch runs in there. So say this is shallow out here. It's like a foot deep. You have these like little, stake beds on Kentucky Lake. I might stay in that little ditch and I'm firing off in there. I'm in 2-3 foot of water. They might be on this bank pushing bait up there. They might be out here in the middle. I might be yo-yoing this thing. That's sort of the key. Like if they're push the bait backs in the pockets, or even on a flat point, for instance, you're not going to utilize forward-facing sonar to be fishing for those fish. They're in 1 foot, 2 foot of water. There's tons of bait out there. You have to feel and vibrate that thing through there, bop, 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 lock up. So that's when I think that a lipless is just absolutely deadly. And it gets slept on a lot in the fall just because everybody's throwing Alabama rigs and minnows and jerkbaits and all these things. But the one thing you are gonna need for this guy, little bit of stain to some wind or some early morning scenarios. I need a little bit. If it's a clear water scenario, those baits not gonna be back in there and the bass aren't gonna be back in there. So you can even have a clear water lake, a clean water lake, like a Lake Lanier or something like that, that the wind blows really hard in the back of a pocket and you get back there and you get on that flatter side and there's some good steep, hard bottom, you can fire this guy out there and catch him. So now, that being said, I'm gonna talk a little, I do like to throw 14 pound on my lipless crankbaits, typically 14 Suffix Advanced Flourocarbon. This is that casting reel, the Skeet Reese one that I've been using so much recently. And then like a 7.4, this is the Select Series, 7.4 medium heavy. This is the all around best crank, like lipless chatterbait rod that I've made anyway. Like I feel like it is the best. It is higher price point, but if you're in the market for one of those, this is a bad little dude. All of those are key components. I'm trying to give you, let me see if I can go to a steeper area just to give you another idea of what that looks like. Okay, this is just a good, it's not the exact same, but you're gonna get an understanding. Same thing, on this right-hand side, you have the ditch. That's what you would call the ditch in the lake or in that pocket, the main gut, right? You can see the flats over here on this side, the guts right here. So this is where, as I get back out here, it sort of fizzles out in the back. So all this water back here in 7 foot's shallow, but you still have this little high spot there. You can see that little push. So this flat right here is probably gonna be that's probably gonna be the juice, because you have bait fish that might be out here in the afternoons, or it might be back there, but like this little push of that flat, now that water's down, that's gonna be where I'm gonna throw that lipless all the way back to there, right? So I'm gonna go down that bank, all right, they're either there, they're not, wind's blowing. Now, that being said, now it's time to talk a little bit about the minnow side of this and where this is gonna go out. Before I go into that, one more thing I do have to say, is I do have to say, for my jig fishermen, you have to have a jig on. I don't wanna forget this. A jig still catches them, they're eating crawfish this time of year. I will say this is more steeper banks, lay downs, stuff like that, docks. It's a good deal, but I do want to hit on this before we transition. Blue Rock makes one, several different companies make a good small jig, but I've been cutting down a hedgehog and throwing it in the back of the jig. Really consistent action from a hedgehog, and just put it on the back of there. It's a little bit different than a chunk. Nothing crazy, it makes him streamline. He's a little bit longer from a finesse style, but it's perfect. So, been throwing that, hopping that around. You guys know, 7.3 to 7.6 is really what I throw a jig on, depending if I'm dragging it, hopping around. But typically it's shallow water cover, what's available, a stump, a tree, a dock, a rock bank. That's where I'm gonna be mostly focusing my time. More steeper banks, so where I'm gonna be focusing the time of the jig. Always gotta have it tied on, so I don't wanna forget you guys, because that is something that I still always have tied on, especially as the water temperature starts to decline and those fish, they just bite it, okay? A jig's just one you gotta have on. Go back to the snare, go back to talking about the lipless, talking about the ditch and how all this goes down. I wanna give you the premise of what's going down and why before we jump into this whole thing with minnowing and all that stuff. We're gonna go pretty deep into it all. So the big thing here is what you're seeing is you have this gut. A lot of times the bait will be out in this area, and there might be bass swimming around the bait. We call it floating. They're out there in the bait, they're eating bait out in the back of a pocket. So what happens is the wind blows, or it's early in the morning, or it's cloudy all day, and for whatever reason the bait stays high, and for whatever reason it's all back out there in the very back of this bay. So what do the bass do out here? They shift with the bait. So the bass that are all out in here, now all of a sudden you have the bait's gone. Well, where do the bass go? They're either going in or they're going out, right? So you go back into the bay or you're gonna go out that way. To me, that's why I'm throwing that lipless in the back of the bay. When the bait is present, now I'm like, bop, bait's present, fish are in here, okay, let me go ahead and fish this way. Now, flat, calm day, sunny, this is where it transitions. Flat, calm day, sunny, water's clear as heck back there. You see a flicker here, a flicker there. You're looking at your 2D sonar. You're like, dude, there ain't nothing in here. That's when, if you don't have forward-facing sonar, skedaddle. Get on. Like, don't even mess with it. But now, transitioning it, if you do have forward-facing sonar, that's a great opportunity to slide out of the creek a little bit, right? And slide out into this area, because a lot of times those fish will go back out and follow the bait and suspend. So that's what it is. That's really what I'm getting to in prefacing all this thing. So time to jump into the minnow craze, just because I think it's time to sort of talk through why, when. I have every one of them rigged up. Let's first off talk about the Freeloader, just because you guys have, I mean, you've seen it. The Freeloader has been nuts since it hit the scene. Gunnersville won, I think, I've won 3 major events since the Freeloader's come out. So probably whatever, $400,000, $350,000 worth of winnings. I don't even know what we won this year. Yeah, we won a lot. We've been very, very fortunate, lucky, blessed to have caught a lot of bass on a Freeloader, and it's been a lot of fun. So that being said, there's a lot of different things that go down, but we're gonna talk about more specifically what I use this time of year, right, in November. Let's first run down exactly each product and talk a little bit about it, and then we're gonna dive deeper into it. That way it's an overview, gives you guys a little bit of understanding of what it is, talk about it, and then we'll do an overview of the whole, or we'll do like a deep dive into each one. So this is the OG, this is the Freeloader right here. That's the 4 1/4 Freeloader, starter dog, gizzard shad. You guys have seen that go down, been crazy. Obviously great chatterbait trailer. A lot of you guys use that as a chatterbait trailer, but the whole reason behind this bait is it just was great at multiple different things. It worked really well on a jig head, of course, the one for suspended fish, but also for fishing out offshore in Tennessee River, fishing like brush, all this stuff. I've caught fish from floating around to on the bottom. It just, obviously it's been a crazy scenario of this bait working. Then we added the 5 1/4. So this year, Kentucky Lake, I won Kentucky Lake utilizing this bait right here. So all the fish that I was catching on a minnow in a jig head, during my forward-facing sonar period, I would utilize this. What's funny little thing with this is the first day, I did not use my forward-facing sonar period, the first period, and I caught like 80% of my bass on this bait right here without utilizing forward-facing sonar, just casting it out there and just blind minnowing. So this was a really big bait for that scenario, and worked, unbelievable. The 6-inch right here, this guy, when you're needing that bigger bait presence, this guy right here specifically is just a bigger profile. And I'll show you him out of the package. Bigger profile, you need more presence, just like a glide bait, think that way, 7.5 inch to, or you go from 5-inch glide to a 10-inch glide, you're gonna be able to draw them from further away. You have more attention, focus on your bait, and that's sort of the idea behind bigger profiles, right? So, that's the 3 in that. Let's talk real quick, an overview on the Mooch minnow, the OG Mooch minnow. So Dustin's won 2 big tournaments on this guy. Unique from the standpoint of like has a different, this different like turbo kicking tail. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. So this is the original 3.5 inch. We went with a 2.5 inch right here. So you want smaller profile, phenomenal spotted bass, large mouth, and then on small bait, they want something a little bit different. This guy, and unbelievable crappie bait. Okay, so then you have him, and then last, you have the 4-inch. That's the whole 4.5 inch. So you have 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. So that's the whole family right there. I'm gonna tie this up, and we're gonna talk about like a little bit of what jig head I use a lot of times. There's a lot of different jig heads out there on the market, but to me, like one of the better jig heads out there, if you like the premium jig heads, tungsten, VMC tungsten jig head. This guy right here, let me see if I can show you guys. Right there, that guy. Comes in a 2-pack, they're pricey, but make sure you tie good knots. But they're really good. I mean, they are. I mean, a lot of the top pros, you see, when you're looking around, you see what they're using, and they're using that head. So I do tie a loop knot on a lot of my stuff. And so picking the right jig head out is really, really important just in getting the right action with the bait. So right now I'm tying a 1/4 ounce jig head on. I would say 3/16 day in and day out is my favorite, but say I'm gonna fish a little bit deeper, I'll use a 1/4. So I'm just gonna go ahead and rotate this guy. There's certain scenarios I'll use like a super light head or like a certain, I want the stability to stay where it's at. So I don't want as like when sometimes when you put a loop knot on like a lighter head, with certain baits, it'll make it go really squirrely. So I want it to stabilize it too. Sometimes I don't want it to be bouncing around. But then as I go up and higher in my weight, like a 1/4 or like a 5/16, I'm definitely tying a loop knot on those because now you have so much stability with the jig head itself. Now I'm needing that freedom to create more rocking. See what I'm saying? So makes sense. But that's the reason behind it, giving up that stuff for sure. So now, and I will also cut my loop knot short. I'll cut it not short, but I cut it like that. I'll leave that tag in just a little bit long right there, just to where if it slips a little bit, no reason to pull through it, right? Like if you think the fish is really paying attention that closely to your tag end being a 1/4 inch longer, probably not. Then you get the wrong bait on. Let me just sort of talk about the original Freeloader real quick here. Still one of my absolute favorites. PVC plastic, so more of a typical plastic to what you see. The one thing that I will say with this particular jig is, this jig head, is I'm really taking your time. A lot of times I'll get him really, when I rig this bait, I'll rig him to where I'm not getting a lot of plastic. And what I mean by that is I try to make it to where I'm not rigging it deep into the plastic, giving you more bite in your hook. Dab of super glue, use some super glue, and now you're good to go. Right there, right? So now he's good to go. That's a perfect, great little guy to be tossing around this time of year, period, end of story. 4 1/4 has killed the game. Obviously, it all depends on the profile of the bait fish that you're actually, really focusing and really throwing around, right? So if you're fishing on a lot of bait and a lot of bait's really small, sometimes I'll throw a little bit bigger bait to sort of show the fish something different. But if they shy away from that, that's when I'm like, all right, maybe I can do something a little bit different from those fish, figure out a way to throw something a little bit different. But also don't be afraid to be throwing this stuff around like laydowns and stumps and brush and those things as well. In that standpoint, when I'm talking about more stationary cover, if I throw like a 4 1/4 freeloader out there and they don't want to move on it, they just sort of look at it and they go back to the cover, that's when I'm really starting to think, okay, I don't have a big enough presence to draw those fish to me. That's when I'm gonna go the opposite way and go into a little bit bigger freeloader. So then as I transition to that, like I have a 1/4 ounce head. This is actually the new minnow shaker head right here. And this thing is freaking sick. I gotta show you guys this thing. See it right there. That's the minnow shaker head. It's not out, I don't think, white yet. It's a bad little dude. I have a loop knot on here. This loop knot was not the best tied, so don't even look at it. What I'll do is I'll start transitioning to your bigger freeloaders. Your 4 1/4, your 5 1/4, your 6 1/4. That's when I'm gonna start transitioning that a little bit different. The cool thing about this guy is you don't need, I know this is gonna be a little long-winded, but I wanted to show you guys some of the scenarios, the whole thing, right? So now this is locked up. He's not coming off. That's the one thing I do love about the minnow shaker. You do not need super glue. He ain't coming off. You pull him off, he's done. It's over with. Like, meaning you need another one. You need another cricket. That's when I'll throw like a bigger profile though. 5 1/4, 6 1/4, when I can see I can't make the fish move. And what I mean by that is, if I can't get those fish to react to like the regular freeloader, I'll go down, or I'll go up in size to a bigger profile to get, say if there's 3 fish down there, or 1, 2, 3 fish down there, they come up and look, I might have a better chance of drawing them. Number 1, bigger drawing power, but number 2, now I have a bigger presence because I draw them, but now they commit. If I have a better committing percentage, then that's when you know you're getting the right bait, right profile. And then last, I actually have this one. I've caught several on this the other day. And this is the 6 1/4. Here in the package already rolled up. This is the hybrid swim bait jig. This is the 5/16, the same one that I've used for a lot of years. You can use a lot of different ones out there, but this is the one that I've been using, just playing around with. I tweaked that hook up a little bit just in case if you are hot from the hook set standpoint, like you want to hook them quick, like they bite your stuff and you crack them, probably not the best maybe for you in that scenario, because when they bite this, it's like a shake, 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 doop. You reel down, rod those. You snap set. What happens is if you snap set on a minnow or like a freeloader, and you have like a hook that doesn't have a lot of bite in it, like this one doesn't have a ton of bite in it, it's more of a pull set thing. If you snap set on a jig head that doesn't have a lot of bite, meaning the line tie to the hook point, you tend to miss your fish and lose them a lot more. In that case, really taking your time and pulling into those fish is really important to really catch that fish. As far as rod, reel, line, and all this setup, I throw about the same thing. Now I'll bump this up with the 6 1/4. So I'll throw like my 7-1 in my select medium, just a little bit bulkier rod, but you can throw them all on the 7.0 medium. So this is 7.0 2.0, 8-pound braid is still what I throw, and then I'll adjust my leader depending on the bait. Like I'll even go up to like a 15, but it really just depends on how big your guides are too, because then the bigger the leader, the bigger the overall knot, right? So the bigger than that pound test, you're gonna overall knot coming through your guides. So I'll still go, 12 is a good number though. 12 is a good pound line that when you're throwing a, you know, a freeloader or anything like that, minnowing, like those fish really see that and they come up there and just eat it, and it's just like, they're looking at your bait. That's what they're looking at. That's sort of just a general rule of thumb when I'm throwing each of those. So those are all PVC. Let's jump into the Mooch minnow, which is completely different. The Mooch minnow is TPE. PVC is more your conventional plastic, and then the TPE is more of like the Elastec kind of plastic. That's stuff that you guys, you know, so a lot of people don't like this plastic because sometimes it's a little cumbersome to rig. But when you get it right, you can get one bait and use it all day, and you're like, you might use a pack in a week. It's time of fishing, right? So it's really cool to utilize this because you get the best bang for your buck. So it takes a little time to figure out, but if you are bassing on a budget, this is a great bait to, or this kind of material is great to be utilizing because you're gonna get a lot more out of it. I mean, I remember fishing up at Dale Hall, I was catching them on a Mooch minnow, and I caught them, I bet you I didn't change maybe one bait. I caught like 25 bass on it. This guy right here, because it's this keeper, that's the other reason I like throwing this on this head. You can just push him over it. It's not a hard one to rig when you're rigging a Mooch minnow. That is a 1/0 hook though. They come in a 1/0, 2/0, and a 3/0. So what I'll do is I'll show you guys right here. Let me see if I can sort of show you. You can see that hook right there, maybe. I like to tweak that hook out just a smidge. So right now, he's turned down just a little bit. I want to tweak him out where he's straight, just a little, just 32nd of an inch. What that allows, again, fish bites it, hooks them, it just tends to penetrate a little bit better, right? You got a good hooked up ratio. So I will put a little daub of super glue. As far as jig head size, this is where it really comes a little bit different, okay? So one thing you have to understand is when you're selecting a jig head size for your bait, day in and day out, 3/16 is probably the most universal size. Okay, that's the one that's gonna utilize and work for almost everything except for getting in those bigger profile baits. The 6-inch, you know, freeloader and some of those, because they have more plastic, so they need a little bit more stability, okay? That's when you actually look in the pool, you see that. The opposite effect happens for the smaller baits. To get the true action that you want out of them, you need to be throwing lighter heads, 1/8, 3/16, quarter is max for if you were trying to get a rocking action. That's why I made that Mooch minnow, was basically behind it was talking about like, I wanted something when I put a quarter on a smaller bait that I still had action, but it wasn't, because like once you put a quarter on like a 3.5-inch minnow, you're not getting a rocking action. All right, you're just getting this thing to go like this. It just looks pretty lame, but that is what it does look weird. The thing with the Mooch minnow is with that tail on those tabs at the end, now you have that little kicking action, right? Like a little minnow shaking and shimmering. So I can just reel him, or I can shake him still, but then I still have that minnow just sort of that tail movement, right? So I'm getting more when I'm going to quarters, 5/16, 3/8 on this bait. Like even like a Dale Hollow, I caught him on a 1/2 on a Mooch minnow. I pitch it out there, whoosh, goes down. I'm sort of moving, doop, catch him. It's another way to trigger a bite. So that's really what it really comes down to on that guy. And so with this bait, I will go down to like a 610. I'll go to a 610 medium light. So like to me, if those fish in this bay are eating smaller profile shad, threadfin shad specifically, I'm probably gonna reach for that Mooch minnow or that smaller freeloader first. So then I'm gonna go out here, I'm gonna fish for those fish that are around that bait. I'm gonna focus in on this Duncan bay. You can't go into Duncan, I think probably, I think there's something like in some of those bays, you can't go past like November, this is Wild Refuge, November 15th. So don't be running into these places and say Jacob told you to go there after the November 15th. So if you're watching this right now, I think it is November. You got to check your regulations, please. Don't be rolling up. It was not my fault. I'm sorry. Do not send me a ticket. So all of this is really setting up, okay, even if right here, so this is all coming out here, say the bait leaves back here, this is a perfect scenario where this is a bottleneck, where all the bait can be pushed together for all the bass, the white bass, catfish, the drum. Like, this is a perfect place where I would really focus if I'm like, okay, the fish are floating around and they're not in the back. They might go literally, let's measure this real quick here just because we can do it on Lowrance, a mile from where those fish in the back can travel on a mile in 4 hours. If the bait goes there, guess what? They're going out there. So that's a great little bottleneck in an area that I would focus like some of my time on, throwing those smaller baits at first. You can throw bigger ones. Most of the time, the bigger like gizzard shad, gizzards aren't really out there in the middle of the bays. So you hear random gizzard shad always get around that. And that's what I'm throwing like that bigger freeloader. They're more on the flats, adjacent to the flats, on the corners of stuff. Typically when I visually see them, now you will see big schools with gizzards out there at times, but most of the fish that are actually feeding out there, they're eating pretty small bait. And then that sort of transitions us into the smaller profile, even the baby minnow. And this one really was behind my boy DC. This is the 2.5 inch Mooch minnow. And so this guy, being TPE as well, I've not had this head right here, works okay for it. I'm not gonna be straight up with you. I don't have the perfect head for this guy. I'm actually using that moon eye head a little bit more, and I literally just ran out of them. There's a moon eye head that has a pretty small hook on him. I'll throw like a 16th or an 1/8. The smaller that bait, again, the smaller the bait, the lighter the head. So like the most I'm gonna probably throw on this one is gonna be an 1/8. Like you could throw a 3/16, but if I'm reeling him, or a 1/4 if I'm reeling him, and just not trying to get like that shaking that action, because you're not, when you go down that small of a minnow, you're not getting rolling action anymore. Unless you're using maybe like a 16th, you probably can get away, you can get a little bit of it, but you're not getting as much of this. You're getting this, and then that's when you're really dependent on this back here, right? The one thing that I do like to do, I like to do this a lot, on the Mooch minnow specifically, let me see if I can show you guys. See that tab right there? See that bottom tab? If I want to have a little bit less kicking action right there on that bottom tab, all I do is cut that bottom off. Then you have this small tab on the end right there, right? And that just makes it go, so like it makes it a higher frequency. So where before it's like probably like this, now it's like even tighter. So it's really cool. I like that if I'm trying to get just if you're trying to get a little bit something different and you want less drag on it, you can do that. One thing I will say as well, same thing, 610, you really need a medium light for this technique. You need something a lighter action, so your this is a 610 medium light. You need super fast tip. You need to be more parabolic to even cast it because you're throwing 16th all the way to like 3/16. And profile does matter. Typically, this technique is a better deal where like the water clarity is a little bit clearer, where the fish can see so well. I'm not saying this is the perfect technique for Kentucky Lake. What I am saying is the smaller minnows tend to play a lot more when the fish can visually see it well. 2 foot, 3 foot visibility at least. And now like they're so like, oh, it's just a little minnow. Eat it, right? Literally thinking a minnow. Maybe not even thinking like a little shad. Okay, it's just a little shad who got away from the school. They just can't help it. But you can catch big ones doing this too. So don't, like, I'm gonna say it's like almost BFS portion of like your minnowing. This is the finesse version of minnowing. And sometimes that profile does make all the difference. It does, really does. So that being said, we'll give you some more breakdown of like everything later on in a video, but I wanted to overview some of this stuff so you guys at least know what's going on. And then last but not least, I gotta talk about this guy real quick here. It is the 4.5 inch Mooch minnow. So a little bit bigger profile, very similar to a freeloader, does not have as much depth as a freeloader, so his belly doesn't come down as much, so he doesn't have as much drawing power as a freeloader. Similar, but really good little profile bait, and he rocks like crazy. The one thing that I've really enjoyed with this bait, so I can make this bait rock with everything from, this is a 3/16 on it right now, basically like a 1/4 and down. Typically at 4 inch size, 1/4 and down is where you're gonna still get some rocking action. I can get up to a 5/16 if I needed to, but the good rocking action is gonna be a 1/4 and down. If I wanna reel this bait with this guy right here and just shake him, I can do that just fine. If I want more rocking action out of him, all I gotta do, again, I really like taking that bottom tab off and it works throughout the whole lineup. Take the bottom tab off, now you just have the top, again, just that top, and that catches water and makes it like this, shake it, gives you more rocking action. So it just depends on the day, depends on your technique. If I'm throwing like a, maybe a quarter, a 5/16, a 3/8, I'm getting to deeper fish, I'm not taking that tab off. I'm trying to get everything I can out of that thing and kick it in action. But this guy right here, he rocks unbelievable. He's a perfect size. This is like the all around like perfect size profile to just go out there, put it on a jig head, super glue him on there. He's not coming off, and you're just gonna, again, this is the cheat code. If you're trying to get a little bit more bang for your buck, you like freeloaders, you throw a 4.5, 4.25 freeloader a lot. He's not as big a profile as him. He has a little bit different profile at times when I like to throw him over a freeloader and then a freeloader. It's just a great bait to throw in those conditions because you can just catch so many bass. Like you literally, I'm not even joking, yo. This is where it's at. Like it's a bad little dude. I'm not gonna say it takes over the 4.25 for me because I throw the 4.25 so much on a chatterbait and on that, but he's high on my list from every fish counts format perspective, like where I have to catch him like in 2.5 hours. Hopefully nobody's watching this thing because don't be stealing. Like I'll have 50 anglers of fishing against next year. They'll be all shaking a 4.5 inch. I mean, listen, when you have to get in your tackle bag in your box and get other baits out, that's time. If I'm just like, okay, he's good to go, zip, 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 that is a bad dude. All of these rods set up from either a 610 or to a 610 medium light or a 7.0 medium action spinner rod. Okay, so to sort of break this whole thing down, I went pretty long-winded there, so hopefully you got some good information out of that. And I wanted to just sort of break them down just to give you guys that understanding of all that. We're gonna try to do a video later on, potentially. Let me know if you want that, like a master class of minnowing. So my goal is to show you some of this stuff, some of the stuff that we talked about today, but really show you that. Maybe get on the water a little bit, throw that maybe even some active target 2 recordings, maybe. I don't know, we'll see what we can do. But let me know if that's something you guys wanna see. If that's something you wanna see, drop a comment below, let me know that. As always, make sure you're letting me know what lake you would want to see. The last thing I'm gonna do an overview of the minnow world with these baits real quick here. I think we sort of broke that down fairly well, but there's multiple things going on in Kentucky Lake. Do not sleep on the main river for your smallmouth. The main river flats, you got giant flats for smallmouth. They're gonna be around, it could be stumps, could be brush, could be hard bottom gravel. You can't go wrong on the main river as well. Just the problem is the main river, what tends to happen on the main lake is wind blows. So your wind blows like crazy, and when the wind blows really hard from the north and the currents coming from the south, that's how it gets mean. That's the worst days I've ever had on Kentucky Lake from the wind. If you know what I'm talking about, if y'all have been watching this thing, you know what I'm talking about. This lake is awesome. There's a lot of things. These techniques are gonna work in a lot of different lakes all around the country, from highland reservoirs to deep water lakes. We're gonna have to change it a little bit. Bait, just remember, if you don't get anything out of this, just remember where the bait fish are, the bass are near. Think about it. This time of year, one thing, bait fish, bass, go fishing, enjoy your time on the water, and if you get a big deer, send me a picture of it. You catch a big fish, send me a picture of it too. Appreciate you all following along. See you on the next one.